The Power of Infographics in Your Marketing Efforts with Brian Wallace, Episode 30. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Profit with Law. Today, I have a wonderful opportunity to introduce another guest on the show. And this guest and I crossed paths through my LinkedIn efforts, and he's got quite the presence on LinkedIn. One of the first LinkedIn profiles that have been given the live broadcast feature on LinkedIn Live Video that is slowly being rolled out to select individuals who have created a significant presence on the platform. So, without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about Brian Wallace. Brian Wallace is the owner of Now Sourcing, which is a marketing firm that specifically deals with infographics. And I'm excited to be able to share this with you, where you can kind of get an understanding of what infographics are and how they could be used in your marketing agenda. But here's the official bio that I was given that I'm going to read to you, and that's Brian Wallace is the founder and president of Now Sourcing, an industry-leading infographic design agency based in Louisville, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, Ohio, which works with companies that range from startups to Fortune 500s. Brian also runs LinkedIn local events nationwide, hosts the Next Action podcast, and has been named a Google Small Business Advisor from 2016 to present. So we had a wonderful conversation, and I hope that you get value as well from it. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and queue up that interview right now. Here you go. Brian, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Moshe.
It is my pleasure, and we're always looking for new faces, new opportunities to get people in front of the law firm owners that are listening to this show, especially people that are outside of the legal industry, experts in their field that we can bring to the table. So our paths crossed through a LinkedIn event here locally for me, and I said, you know what, this would be a wonderful opportunity to get somebody in front of the audience that they probably haven't heard from before. So, Brian, why don't you tell us briefly what it is that you do today, and then I'd like to just get a bit of a backstory of how you got into that, and then we can get more specific with what we want to discuss.
Absolutely. Let's do this. So today, I'm the founder and president of Now Sourcing. We're the top-rated infographic agency in the United States. And in August this year, we're actually going to turn 13 years old. For about a decade of that 13 years, we've just been dedicated to infographic campaigns. And a lot of people don't dream about that when they're going to grow up because it didn't really exist as an industry back then. So a little bit about me. Born in Brooklyn, grew up in Metro New York in Rockland County. Depending on where you are in New York, you will endlessly fight to the death about where that is, if it's a suburb, if it's upstate, but we'll leave that to the New Yorkers to debate in the comments. So
it's definitely a suburb.
Thank you.
But if a Long Islander, since I live there, it's a suburb.
I hear you. Born and raised, or raised at least. And yeah, but if you ask somebody from Long Island, they will say it's upstate. And then we'll tell them, well, we can get to New York City faster. So there's no clear winner in this, but I digress. So I went to undergrad in upstate New York and got a double major in pre-law and philosophy, politics, and law. Did a lot of political science, game theory, also some computer science and social psychology, neuroscience, all sorts of stuff. But since I didn't want to stay in undergrad forever, I got the heck out of there before sticking around to get a whole computer science degree. But then I also have advanced degrees in tech. I actually thought about going to law school. I wanted to be an internet lawyer, but after seeing some of my lawyer friends not super happy with their career decisions, I decided to cross out the lawyer part and just be an internet. So basically for the last 23 years, I've built up a nice stack of skills in everything from game theory and pre-law and different social sciences, a lot of social psychology and neuroscience stuff. So I really very well understand what makes people think and tick when it comes to what they find interesting online, really looking at left and right brain. And over the years have just been really good at, I hate the phrase, but whatever, making things go viral, but not just stupidly making things go viral, but making more signal to that noise so that people can make really lasting and enduring campaigns to get even the most obscure businesses some actual notoriety and fame and links and traffic and all of those things.
And what is the value for a business to get links and traffic?
Sure. So kind of stepping through what we do, the biggest thing before we even worry about links and traffic and where we're going to take this bus, a lot of companies, not just law, but I would say certainly the legal community, sometimes takes a back seat in terms of creativity, getting known, building a good brand, being a good personal brand, and really being interesting as a differentiator. I'm not just talking about the practice areas that lawyers serve, but I'm saying, why would anybody choose this law firm over the other guy? And don't tell me about your golf game. I'm just saying, in a quick Google search, what are they going to see about you that's interesting and different? So we try to be a communications bridge between a client, which usually is kind of stuck in the paralysis of their four walls, and the media, which is a little overtaxed with too many horrible press releases and garbage, and they just don't have all day to filter through all that stuff. So it's really coming up with the right message to portray in that correct light. Then once we have all that going and we do all of the research and we do all of the design and getting it out to the media, if people are searching for a particular practice area or a keyword, there's really, you could say, two bumps of traffic and attention. First is the initial bump when everybody's talking about you in the media and you have all this third-party referral traffic coming your way and you're just getting known. You can have the social proof. You can tell your clients and prospects, hey, look at this, we were featured in X, whereas most of the rest of our industry is just asleep at the wheel and just hoping that everybody is just going to magically find them like it's pre-internet or pre-social media, which doesn't really work anymore. They can't just, I feel like a lot of this community, they go with heavy-handed advertising, top-down screaming, yellow pages driven kinds of stuff. And that's not really how the world makes decisions anymore. Or if it is, that world is declining, whereas people having their own ideas about things and really a more level playing field seems to be taking the day. So you have that initial bump. And then if people, like I said, are searching for things later on, we make content that it's going to really stick around for the long haul.
So it sounds to me like you're basically saying that spending time to just get a press release or to get known by a media outlet is kind of like a temporary thing that's going to blow over and disappear. And what you really need to do is have stuff that's out there that people are going to find useful time and again, no matter when they find it over time. Did I get that right?
Yep. I would even go further to say that press releases are less than garbage, because a press release is usually measured in impressions. The definition of an impression doesn't even mean that a human is looking at that website. They could just be scrolling on the front page of a website and it's on the page and no one's actually even looking at it. So there could be literally no engagement whatsoever. So I question, in this day and age, why are we even doing that? And the answer that I hear back more often than not is, well, we don't know what else to do. And this seems to work, but how do you know it works? If you're just looking at top line numbers that don't actually do anything for your business, what was the point of doing that, right? You're not the practitioner, you're the lawyer. You're the one who's saving all of these great cases and litigating and coming up with settlements, whatever the case may be, regardless of where you're practicing. It's not your job to also be the marketer, unless you want to be the marketer. If you want to spin up a marketing part of your organization, I think that that's fine. But I feel like a lot of the times it might just be easier and more effective to rely on expertise outside of your organization that's still cognizant of the legal field and can speak that lexicon.
Yeah, so there's so many different directions we can go here, because you hit the nail on the head in that the typical firm owner the feedback that I receive and I've received over time is that they kind of are overwhelmed. Like, which is the right path to take? There's somebody who is really, really famous in the legal industry for his video production company, and he is all about, you need to have a firm video that portrays what the firm is all about. And then firms are paying $10,000 to have this video created, but there's no traffic, so there's nobody ever seeing that video. So that's the wrong place to start. Then there are firms that run TV commercials, and then even in the internet marketing space, there are people who say, oh, you have to be doing Facebook Lives every day, and you have to be, putting yourself out in front of the audience to provide value. Whereas it sounds to me like one of the things that you're saying is, no, the firm owner doesn't need to be doing any of that. That value can be transferred in another way through, and I'm not sure what the through is, but it sounds like you're saying there is another way. First, fill in the blank of what is that other way, and then tell me what you think about all these other options that they have in front of them, and how do they choose which is the right way to go?
I feel very bad for the firm owner because a lot of times they may have no idea what they're getting into. They may just fall into some things where they don't necessarily even own the content. I've seen all sorts of horror stories. So I would say make sure that you have some creative control and make sure that it isn't just creating fun content, because at the end of the day, you can have people that could be a practitioner that talks about strategy, but if you're not going to execute on the strategy, and neither are they, you might have a nice pretty plan sitting at your desk, but you've probably wasted money. And again, nothing wrong with videos and advertising and all those things, but I think that if you truly become known out there in the world, you don't necessarily have to advertise to the level that some of these places do. And one should know that advertising in the legal space is very expensive. If you're going to use something like Google, the cost per click on most legal terms is astronomical, which is okay because if you end up getting a good cost per lead and it turns into really good contracts and billable hours, sure, that's fine. But just know that you're sitting there at one of the most competitive points and junctures on the planet. So certainly not for the faint of heart. But I think that a lot of people, they end up asking the wrong question. So they'll say, and I'll have this conversation probably multiple times a day for all sorts of industries throughout the world. Hey, should I be doing XYZ for marketing? As if this is the only thing in the world, but meanwhile, there's 5,000 other things to do. I think that different businesses will respond differently. So I can sit here and tell you that infographics and distribution is amazing. And then at the same time, somebody could eat my words and eat my lunch and make an incredible outdoor billboard at the right spot and make a lot of money. So you can do creative, amazing things everywhere. But I think the point is to really look at the choices that you have and put together the combinations of things that really speaks to why your brand should be known. I think people, in essence, again, they shortcut the story and how they're different, as opposed to here's a product grid. Here's 10 reasons why we're better than the other guy. Nobody wants to hear that anymore.
Yeah, and you got me thinking with the billboards. I actually mentioned this on another podcast episode. There's a law firm in my area that has literally taken billboards all over the place. Like everywhere you go, you see their billboard, and it just has the name of the firm. It doesn't even say what they do. So even when you're spending money on the marketing in whatever place you chose, if it's not done right, it may not be as effective as you expected it to be.
Very true. If somebody drives a car once for 2 minutes and then they crash into a telephone pole, is it fair to say that driving doesn't work? I don't really understand the arguments that people come up with to have a very basic set of things that they never did properly and then they just damn an entire industry. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. And it's true. I had a conversation with a client earlier today where we had the same exact discussion, and they said, this is the thing. And I said, well, what do you mean the? The indicates that there's only one, and you have many options in front of you. And I think that is, you said that they're not asking the right question. I think that we do understand that there are many different ways to run a marketing strategy, and there's many different things that you can be focusing your efforts on. But I also believe that you need to have a strategy, right? You need to, and that strategy can encompass multiple mediums or different ways of doing things, but you need to have a strategy that you're going to follow moving forward and that is going to pay dividends. So, in your opinion, when is infographics the right thing? Actually, we should probably even ask you what an infographic is, because I think that you probably have opinions about what is considered an infographic versus what isn't. So maybe talk to us a little bit more about infographics themselves, and then is there a size of the firm that would be appropriate for, or is it, a certain level of internet presence that's required? How do we know when that is a piece to add into the marketing arsenal?
Great question. So like the internet, there's a lot of stuff that's just pretty lame. So anybody can write 3 words on the internet, publish it, and call it a blog post. So people could try to make their own infographic in an hour and say it's an infographic. But if it doesn't actually achieve the results, it's probably just a poor copy of what that medium is. So an infographic, according to me, is something that's very well played out as an actual strategy for getting really the combination of 4 different kinds of industries working together. So imagine working with us is like engaging with a research institute, a design agency, a public relations firm, as well as an SEO firm. Very rarely do those 4 kinds of things come together, especially around a single project. So it really is a wonderful end-to-end solution, as opposed to, hey, I had an idea about X, and in an afternoon, I'm just going to throw together a couple of thoughts and put together some really poor looking visuals, right? So as far as who is ready and the size of the place, I don't think the size matters. I think it's really a function of, are they ready to take marketing seriously? Are they ready to become known? And a lot of places aren't, right? A lot of places, they just want to be a little cottage industry. Maybe they don't really want to grow. Maybe the partners are about to retire. I don't know. So it is made for somebody who is doing all of the basics already. So you have a website, you're getting the word out there in social, your website doesn't look like it's from 20 years ago. Maybe you're speaking at different places, you're utilizing all sorts of social, you're doing webinars, you're going to trade shows, you're speaking at events. So I think that you need to tick off the main boxes and have a regular content strategy before you're ready to do something fancy like this to really be a catalyst.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way you laid that out, because really the first question to ask yourself is, where do I want to take my firm? And if you're not clear on that, then you can't possibly figure out the right marketing strategy for your firm. If all you're looking to do is fill up a solo practice and not go any further than that, then you probably need to go no further than going to some networking meetings and creating some good relationships and having that referral business come in. And then if you're a small practice that you're just going beyond solo, trying to work your way through, you could probably get enough from just some basic Google ad strategy with some Facebook retargeting off of a blog post, and driving people to a phone call into your firm. So I like the way that you laid that out, where you basically described, you narrowed down the number of attorneys that you might be talking to, because how many of the attorneys out there are out there speaking publicly, and how many of them are, have their website, really beautiful and well thought out. And now that we've identified those, it makes it a lot easier for somebody to say, okay, I'm ready for something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is true for all industries. A lot of us are not realistic about expectations. So if you just think that everyone on the internet is going to magically come to you because you're good at something, you're a subject matter expert that's deluded, right? There's lots of people that are good at things. And the sad part of the world, Moshe, is a lot of times somebody who might not even be as good, but they just have a good web presence, they're probably going to get the business over the guy or gal that is a better lawyer with a better success rate. It's very sad, but being known and being recommended. So when people look us up, we're everywhere. There's a web of everything. I mean, I was at a barbecue yesterday and somebody that I didn't even know recognized me from LinkedIn. So I almost can't even go anywhere without somebody knowing at least one dimension of who I am and what I do. And that's wonderful, right? I've spent a long time architecting a really good personal brand and a really good business brand. But at the same time, I never let up and let off the gas of being truly remarkable in terms of results for our clients. So when you can do all of those things, then you have something that's incredible.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And you bring up a dimension that we didn't even talk about, which is your LinkedIn presence. You're one of the few people that have access to a feature called live streaming in LinkedIn, which is, LinkedIn is now, I guess, following Facebook and Instagram with that capability, which is also giving you an additional traction with what you do.
Yeah, I think that when people look at the story of Brian, whether it's myself, my personal journey, what I'm doing with my business, wherever you're finding me out there, I try to remain consistent, which is something that a lot of people don't do. And not just consistent, like showing up, but consistently putting out great content. So for instance, there's a guy out there in the marketing world named Seth Godin, really famous guy, has written probably a few dozen books, built a whole chunk of the internet, really high value keynote speaker. And he barely even spends a lot of time on social. But something interesting that he says about his blog posts is this: for every blog post that you see out there on the internet of his, he trashes about 20. So here you have this marketing genius guy saying at best he's 1 for 21. Not a good batting average, right? So
right, but
when I show up,
he's also not publishing the other 20, which is something so hard for people to do and realize.
Right. People need to realize most of their stuff isn't any good. And I take this to heart myself. I have a filter of quality that for the most part, unless it's just a quick update about something going on in my business or personal life, I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And if it's not something that I would personally find that interesting or engaging or think it's something new, I probably won't publish it. I can't even tell you how many stupid notepads I have and Google Docs and notes on my phone and all of this that will probably never see the light of day, or things are partially finished. And that should be part of the healthy creative process.
All right. So going back to the marketing conversation, if I'm sitting in the shoes of my listener, they're sitting here listening to this conversation, they're like, okay, this is great. You've basically laid out that we need to be consistent, we need to have quality, and we need to be out there. Is there like an A to Z strategy that somebody can take if they have no presence out there today, as far as, what is your opinion as where somebody should start to create the traction necessary to get to that, to the point that you're describing? And more importantly, once they start on that journey, what can they expect as far as results? Because so many people start and then give up shortly after they started because they don't see results.
Right. So it's not a short-term thing. When we make these campaigns, we imagine them for the long term, but we're only a piece of the overall puzzle. So if you think that you're going to sign up and have us make all your problems go away and you're going to sit on the beach all day, the world doesn't really work like that. So you have to figure out how much of this stuff are you going to have you and or your team do, and then which pieces of that strategy should be executed by experts on the outside. So I think that's the first, to have a very real conversation with yourself. If it's just you, have a conversation in the mirror, talk to your trusted advisors, I don't know. But if you have a whole team in place, you really have to figure that piece out. Once you figure that out, then you have a better idea of where you're going. And I'll tell you, it's very difficult. But what I like about the legal industry is there's a lot of really bad marketing. So I think that people who are going to take this seriously, not just for the short-term gains, but really build an empire for the long term, won't necessarily need to spend all that money on ads and can really make a name for themselves. Because what I find, Moshe, is that to be successful out there, you need to become a known, safe entity. And then if you start getting raves and reviews in the press and people are quoting you and you start writing at different places and you make videos and you do all these things, I think it just comes down to, again, what it looks like you like to do and what you could be good at doing along with your team. So some people are podcasters, some people like doing videos, some people like giving public speeches. I mean, if you're a lawyer, chances are you're not going to be that shy, right? So you're probably good at talking and you're probably good at writing, but maybe you're not good at creative writing. So it really depends on that composition of the internal and external team lining up with those objectives. And I think LinkedIn, like we talked about before, is a wonderful place to do it because you can be the brand. People are very interested in that. One of the things that drives me crazy is I go to somebody's about page and it says, our practitioners have 100 years of experience. It's like, okay, that's great, but who are they? And what do they stand for? You can't even show a picture of yourself. That's how good you are, right? So people want that level of transparency. Maybe that's a little weird for the legal field, but they do. They want it desperately.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true. The world itself is moving very quickly in this direction of needing to know more about the person that you're dealing with. And you said something earlier about marketers and the law firms that are good marketers are going to get the cases as opposed to somebody who might be the best in the industry. And the reason for that change, or the way that that's moving, is because people are relying less and less on their personal network to find out who to work with, and they're relying more and more on what they've already experienced on social media. So it used to be that if I needed an estate planning attorney, I might ask my parents or my neighbors if they've ever used an estate planning attorney, if they have a recommendation of somebody that they know that's good. And those recommendations usually were bringing good people to the person. Now, if I've been seeing videos from an estate planning attorney over the last 6 months, and I basically have a relationship with that person visually, even though they don't know who I am, I'm much more apt to pick up the phone and call them before I call my neighbors and ask them. So definitely that's the direction that we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust is a big thing. And beyond your immediate networks and inner circle of real life, this is where all of that branding comes into play. But also making legendary content is definitely a good thing. And I'll point out to you, there's a legendary piece that we did for the legal industry, and it's all talking about knowing your rights when police pull you over. It was for a particular firm, and it was seen millions and millions of times throughout the world. It's been in all sorts of press, and it was so good that even other law firms wanted it, right? You know that you're really onto something big when even your competitors just kind of acknowledge that this is the truth.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll give me the link for that, and we'll put
Sure
it up
will.
in the show notes for this episode so people can check it out if they haven't seen it before. Another point is that if you look at, I mean, me as a consumer, I'm not exposed to law firms' content. I don't know attorneys that are out there podcasting. I don't know attorneys that are out there doing live streaming. So maybe I'm not in the demographic of somebody who needs the attorneys, and that's why I'm not seeing it. Or maybe the attorneys are not doing that good of a job putting themselves out there and creating it and making sure that they're in front of the right audiences. Do you have any opinions about that? Like, what can they do to make sure that they're in front of the right people? Because it's one thing to just go on your personal profile and go live, or put up a post on Facebook. But how do you then turn that into something that the right people are seeing?
That's an excellent question. So I feel like a lot of lawyers like to kind of hide from the limelight, and they just say, well, I'm just being a lawyer and I don't really want to be that creative. So that's not me. I don't want to be the face of the brand. I don't want to be the voice of the brand. There's legalities that I can't do it. I have to have a disclaimer, blah, blah, blah. Everybody hides behind all of these things. But sort of like if we were talking about technology or engineering, it's the verbose, amazing personality guy that can leap out of a tech industry, like a Steve Jobs that built hundreds of billions of dollars for Apple, right? Meanwhile, you had a lot of competitors that were afraid to kind of be a showman and be afraid to be a voice, that just kind of get lost in the background. So I think a lot of people just make excuses. Sometimes you just have to get out there and do it. And if you're not determined to do that, then you have to kind of rethink that strategy and maybe have some of the people do the things for you, right? I think that's really what it comes down to. And again, it's not the most exciting industry for content. And what I say about anything that's a boring brand or boring content is that you have one of the best gifts out there in the world. As much as it's competitive from an ad perspective, a content perspective, like you said, you don't really see a lot of awesome content from all of these places. So if you're willing to look at things a little bit differently, you're going to massively succeed. As far as reaching the right people, how about just reaching people? What if you just went for it and got your name out there and you're in the press all the time, you're getting all this stuff happening on LinkedIn. So you're getting almost like getting the sword and the scalpel, right? So you're getting the masses of people and the broad, but then if you're getting all these other links and traffic and people talking about you, and when they're Googling you, when people are asking very specific things to find on the internet and specific things to find from a law firm, you're showing up. And then you become that trusted, safe voice and individual. And it only builds from there.
You know, it's very true because I mean I'm just looking at our relationship. So you put yourself out there on LinkedIn all the time, and there's nothing about infographics. Like most people who know you probably don't even realize that you do infographics, and you're just putting yourself out there as a personality, as somebody who has strong opinions about things and is very good about putting yourself in the right positions in the right places. Like you go around the country, I know, to LinkedIn meetups, things like that, where you're getting in front of people who are business owners, and it doesn't matter whether they're going to be a client of yours or not. The more of these people that get to know you, the more that exposure builds on itself. I mean, that's how you're on this podcast, where a whole bunch of listeners who have never heard from you or of you are now going to hear this recording, know who you are, and know about infographics, where it may not have been anything they would have ever considered otherwise.
Exactly. And you have to remember, infographics are fairly new to the world. It's a relatively new medium as compared to the field of law, which has sort of been around for a while. So what I find tremendously effective is to push people away from the sale as much as I can. All I want is that people find myself and my brand really interesting, and they'll do the work when they see me out there, and they definitely do see me out there, both online and in person, that they say, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He's really interesting, not just being controversial and not just being another talking head, but wow, if I just listen to what this guy has to say, I'm going to benefit from his knowledge, from his connections, from his generosity, from whatever, from participating. And when they bother to dig deeper, which everybody does, they're sitting there reading everything in my LinkedIn profile. They're clicking on links to case studies and client lists and podcasts, you name it. And then people book their own meetings for wanting to work with us. So it works. It's an inbound methodology as opposed to advertising. We don't spend $1. The only thing that we might do is spend money going to trade shows a little bit, but we don't spend anything on advertising.
That's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing that you can run a business and not spend money on advertising, but that's the world that we live in today. And although I do coach my law firm clients who are trying to create a system that's going to produce immediate results, that needs to be done with ad dollars, because all of these other things are longer term plays. There definitely is a place in the firm for these longer term strategies, and the sooner that you can start building the longer term strategy, the better off you are, because that runway can take a while. Brian, what do you think the time frame might be for somebody to first start creating content on the internet? Let's talk about really good content until they start to see tangible results from that content.
That's going to vary wildly based on what they do. So if you are a $20 to $50 impulse buy company, that could be very quick. But if you are 4, 5, 6, 7-figure long cycle content, that could obviously take a bit more. So it's difficult to put an exact number on that, but we're talking months and not years, but we're not talking days and probably not talking weeks.
Right. So honestly, like the biggest thing I think that, and they're really hiding behind it, but the firm owners, the biggest thing that they say is, I don't have the time. Maybe for some of these solutions, they don't have the money either, but it's usually not the money that comes up as the resistance. It's usually the time factor. And a lot of these new ways of putting yourself out there require the firm owner to be front and center to it. And that's a big hesitation for them, is like, okay, do I really have the time for this? And then the bigger question is why don't you have the time? And let's fix that. Let's put the right people in place, and let's get you out of doing some of the things that you're doing to create that time. For some of them, it's just an excuse, and for others, it's legitimate that they don't have the time. So is there a minimum amount of exposure that somebody should be creating to get this ball rolling, that in your mind that you think obviously you can go live daily on Facebook, and fairly quickly you'll start to build some sort of audience that's watching you, but that's a big commitment. So in your experience, what do you think is a cadence that would be worthwhile, that they're not wasting their time?
So a couple things. One, rather than time, let's use the word fear. I think most people are just afraid to get in front of a camera and hit the button and do it, and then do it again. A lot of people can't get past that. Can't get past the little blinking dot, the little, the dumb little light that we're just staring at, right? We can represent all these big companies and lawsuits and all that, but we can't look at that. So I would say a lot of that just fear can be fought back with a comfort level. So you could literally record videos on your phone and never publish them to anywhere, do them for a few weeks, and then feel much more comfortable with it. Because it's a little weird just talking to a device. Like I'm sitting here talking to my podcast mic right now, but it sounds like I'm perfectly polished because I do this all the time, multiple times a day. I'm talking to people all over the world, whether I'm recording my podcast, being on somebody else's, talking to people on the phone, whatever it is, I'm constantly talking with people in a similar way, both online, virtual, and in person. So a lot of that is just overcoming fear with comfort level and pushing yourself into that zone. The other thing is, I feel like a lot of these people, they say, okay, I'm going to do it. And then they become somehow the marketing and social media practitioner. And they say, wow, I only got 2 likes on the Facebook and I got 37 likes on the Instagram. What does that have to do with anything? Unless you actually set up some meaningful goals, you're not there to be an entertainer, right? You're trying to get some business. So I think a lot of times people just follow cookie cutter instructions rather than listen to experts. Either you should be trained by experts or you should hire experts instead of just, I don't know how people are going to have the time, back to your point, to both be an effective practitioner of the law and become this superhero in social media or marketing. It does happen, and there are people out there, but guess what? Those are the go-to people. And I have some friends that I've worked alongside for years in the law space, and now they're known entities because they did put themselves out there and they are known.
Right. And the truth is that your name becomes known, but it's really you're representing your firm, and you don't need to be the one in the courtroom. You don't need to be the one writing the drafting the document that the client needs. You have staff to do that. And, people are obviously going to say, oh, I want to work with this person because that's who they see front and center. But you can make that ask either unavailable or worth a lot of money, so that only the people who can really afford to pay that are taking your time, and everyone else is coming to you anyway because your expertise is controlling the decisions in the firm. So the people that are working for you are hopefully producing similar results that you would produce independently.
Absolutely. Well said. And yeah, I'd say, especially in the field of law, it's not really a race to see who's the cheapest, right? I think that when you're good at something and you're known, you can effectively charge a premium and people will respect you for it.
Absolutely. So this was actually really interesting, and I'd love to share how people can get to know more about you. I know that you have your own podcast. It's called the Next Action Podcast. And you obviously you mentioned this company, Now Sourcing, that does infographics. What can listeners here on the show do to follow your journey, get to know more about you, and stay in touch with you?
Sure. So if you're looking for a regular heartbeat of the cult of Brian, probably watching me, following me on LinkedIn. There's lots of people named Brian Wallace out there. So look the one that is also Now Sourcing. And then, like you said, typically every Wednesday we publish a new podcast for Next Action. And then pretty much every social media handle is Now Sourcing, and then on the web is nowsourcing.com.
Okay. And the Next Action Podcast, so who's that geared to and what's it about?
It's a 15-minute catapult into greatness. So a lot of people can't see beyond their 4 walls and are hiding the shadows and all of that. So it's similar to what we're talking about today. It's not specifically for any field. I feel like sometimes you'll have some of the largest people in corporate America. Sometimes you could have entrepreneurs. It's kind of all over the place because I purposely try to find different archetypes of people, but it's really getting them unstuck in a short, bite-sized 15 minutes.
Very cool. 15 minutes sounds great, although it's 2 and a section increments of billable time for attorneys who bill in 6-minute increments, but hopefully not my clients who I'm trying to get away from the billable hour. So, Brian, it has been a pleasure having you on the show, and your insight has been absolutely wonderful, and I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure that everybody's going to enjoy listening to this.
Absolutely, Moshe. Thank you again for the opportunity. It's been fun.
Yep. Take care. Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.